England, 1760. One morning, a farmer named John Harris woke before dawn. Beyond his window stretched the commons, the same land that had always been there. His father had worked it, his grandfather before him. They had grazed their cattle there, gathered firewood, fed their families. But John Harris didn't know what was coming. In Parliament, men were writing a law that would decide the fate of that land forever. The history of enclosure stretches back to the 15th century, a long, slow march through time. It moved through phases: the conversion of land to sheep pasture, the reorganization of open fields, and finally, parliamentary enclosure, each era reshaping the land in its own image. But in the latter half of the 18th century, that march became a sprint. Parliamentary Enclosure Acts accumulated to roughly 4,000 in total. Hundreds of thousands of acres of common and open field land were redistributed, and in some regions, the very foundations of rural life were shattered. In numbers alone, it sounds abstract. But behind every acre, behind every act of Parliament, there were families like John Harris's. The landlords had their arguments, and some of them carried real weight. Crop rotation, selective breeding, new tools, innovation centered in Norfolk spread across the countryside. Agricultural output soared. England could now feed a population that was growing faster than ever before. England produced more food. It could sustain the swelling cities. That much was true. But in the shadow of this agricultural revolution, another story was unfolding. Behind the numbers of prosperity, the people who vanished. The records tell us farmers like William existed by the thousands. When they lost the commons, what exactly did they lose? It wasn't just land. The commons were a bundle of customary rights: the right to graze animals, to gather wood and branches, a foundation of survival woven into the fabric of community life. To grow food, to find fuel, to keep their animals alive. All of it held together by the bonds of a shared world. A single act of Parliament erased all of it with a stroke of a pen. William gathered his wife and 2 children and left the village where his family had lived for generations. He headed north, toward the town where chimneys choked the sky with smoke. In the 18th century, England's countryside held the great majority of its people. But that balance was shifting rapidly. In 1851, the British census recorded a number that would echo through history. For the first time, the urban population outnumbered the rural. Even in regions where the agricultural revolution had taken hold, the countryside could not absorb the workers fast enough to match the surging population. Those who had no options left turned toward the cities. There was nowhere else to go. Where did they go? Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds. Into the factory towns that the Industrial Revolution was conjuring from the earth, the farmers flooded in. The factory owners were pleased. Farmers stripped of their land were pouring into the cities, an endless stream of desperate men and women. Labor was abundant. And when labor is abundant, wages can be crushed. The Factory Commission Report of 1833 put it plainly. Working days exceeding 12 hours were widespread. Child labor, too, rampant. By 1833, laws were finally enacted to restrict the age and hours of child labor in textile mills. The fact that such laws were necessary tells you everything about how desperate the situation had become. Injured on the job, tomorrow someone else would take your place. This was the human foundation of the Industrial Revolution. The people driven from the land powered the factories. The factories ran, and so England became the workshop of the world. But the price of that transformation was paid by the farmers who had lost everything. The cities swelled beyond recognition. But the cities were not ready for what was coming through their gates. There were no sewers. There was no clean water. There was not enough housing. In 1842, Edwin Chadwick delivered his report on the sanitary condition of the laboring population to Parliament. The numbers he recorded were devastating. Including infant mortality, the average age of death among the working class in industrial cities was just 17. A society where infants died one after another. Cholera swept through the streets. Tuberculosis spread without mercy. This was the other number produced by the success of the agricultural and industrial revolutions. But humanity does not simply endure. It fights back. In 1811, the Luddite movement erupted. Its leaders were skilled craftsmen, weavers and textile workers, whose world was being dismantled by machines. Mechanization drove down their wages, shattered their traditions, and threatened their very survival. The story cannot be reduced to a straight line from enclosure to revolt. But this movement was born in an age when mechanization and the agricultural revolution were simultaneously tearing apart the foundations on which ordinary people had built their lives. The government sent in the army. The movement was crushed. Its leaders were executed. Others were transported. But the questions they raised did not die. They smoldered on as rage, as memory, as the seed of what was coming next. And in London, a man was watching all of this. Karl Marx. He walked the halls of the British Library, reading the records of enclosure with relentless focus. And in 1867, in the first volume of Das Kapital, he gave this process a name: primitive accumulation. What is capitalism? It did not descend from the sky, fully formed. It seized the land from the peasants. It turned the commons into private property. It stripped people of their means of survival until they had no choices left. It created by the millions human beings with no option but to sell their labor for wages. On that foundation, capitalism was built. That was Marx's analysis. So what did the enclosure movement bring to England? On one side, rising agricultural output and the supply of labor to the cities. On the other, the creation of a low-wage workforce that made the Industrial Revolution possible. England became the workshop of the world, the dominant power of the 19th century. But recent scholarship tells us this story is not so simple. The flood of people into the cities was driven not only by enclosure, but by rapid rural population growth that outpaced the countryside's capacity to provide work. The impact of enclosure varied by region and by class, and the way compensation was designed, the way rights were redistributed, meant that some gained while others lost everything. And a deeper question lingers. Were the commons truly inefficient? If destroying a functioning institution, one that sustained people's lives, is what we call modernization, then we must ask, modernization for whom? Without the agricultural revolution, there could be no industrial revolution. Without the industrial revolution, there could be no modern capitalism. And the agricultural revolution began by dismantling the shared foundations that generations of farmers had depended on to survive. This is the origin of British capitalism, the one no one wants to talk about. And so I put the question to you. Is prosperity always built on someone else's sacrifice? Or can prosperity and justice be pursued at the same time? Look at the wealth of the society you live in today and ask yourself, is there somewhere in its foundations a place where something was once taken? And the next time you hear the words efficiency or modernization, ask yourself this: efficiency for whom? History speaks to each of us differently. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for witnessing this moment in history with me. On this channel, we follow the human stories hidden behind the machinery of economics, from the enclosure movement to the inequality of today. It is our mission at Turning Point History to go beyond the famous names and the grand events, and to confront the choices and suffering of the nameless people who lived through it all. If this video moved you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support is what makes the next story possible. See you in the next one.